Welcome to the Liberace Mansion.
Welcome down to the Vegas Sun, looking at the people, the events, and the news surrounding Las Vegas and the entire Vegas Valley. Hello, I'm Steve Schorr. We are live from the Liberace Mansion. Probably some of the more unique pieces that are in this mansion are two that you'll be seeing a lot of. One, in just a couple of weeks, you'll hear a lot about this great piano. It was, a matter of fact, Liberace's 9-foot-long touring grand piano. The other piano is this one I'm sitting at. It's an amazing piano, and I've asked my good friend Simon from Family Music to stop by and kind of give you a taste of what it is. It's called a Chickering piano. Chickering was the original piano maker in America, and this wonderful piano actually was made in 1876. Yes, 1876. And Simon, still sounds pretty good, right? It is. Well, give us a taste of it. An amazing piano. It's iconic when it comes to this incredible mansion. Speaking of icons, in a moment, you'll meet a man who is an icon of the Las Vegas community. You get a chance to hear his story and what he's done and the trials and tribulations that has made him the man that he is. You'll meet him in just a couple of seconds. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Whatever you know about Las Vegas, you probably know because of the hotel casinos. But sometimes when you get away from the hotel casinos, it's the people that make the difference. On a program today, a very, very special man. He is an icon of Las Vegas. He's been here for a long time. I'm honored to say he's a friend of mine. But what he has done over time for this community has been amazing. Our very special guest, Mr. Ed Bernstein. Ed, welcome to our program.
Thank you. I put up a lot of billboards over time.
You're still an icon of this community. You know, you came here at almost the same exact time that I came here, 1976.
Exactly.
And in 1976, this was a very, very different town than it is today. When you look at it, is it what you expected it would be?
When I moved, I can remember the day that I got here. I got here in May of 1976. It was already 100 degrees. And the entire next 3 months, it never got lower than 100 degrees, which was mind-boggling to me coming from Philadelphia, where you never saw a 100-degree temperature. But the most memorable thing I can remember at that time was I can remember driving down Boulder Highway, and there was no speed limit. And you could literally, you remember that? Until 1970, I don't know, 7, 9, somewhere like that. And they had this federal, national 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, and they changed it, and became a 55-mile-an-hour zone. But it was the Wild West. You know, everybody drove around in trucks with rifle racks in the back, you know, going 90, 100 miles an hour down streets. You know, it was totally different. Did I ever imagine it would be like this? No. Did I ever imagine we would have a professional football team coming and a professional hockey team here? We have this week a professional soccer team. We have a women's basketball team. We had the revenues.
Baseball stadium about to begin?
Baseball stadium, training facilities. It's just mind-boggling. I mean, Las Vegas offers this best of everything that this country has to offer.
Listen, you have become probably the father of attorneys in town dealing with injury cases, wrongful cases, so on and so forth. But you didn't start that way. You started in this town as a public defender, if I'm not mistaken. How did you make that transition from being that individual, a public defender defending individuals, to being the attorney that you are today, standing up? Let's face it, you have faced some of the toughest cases that ever took place. You represented a great number of people during the PepCon incident. You represented a great number of people during the MGM fire and the Hilton fire. Your largest case, if I'm not mistaken, was a verdict of $104 million, dealing with an unfortunate medical situation that occurred in Las Vegas. Now you're very much involved in the 1 October incident. How did you make that personal transition from being the public defender to that attorney?
Being a public defender is a great foundation for any attorney. The converse of that is working in a district attorney's office, because you're always in court, you're always engaged, you get experience very quickly in those kind of jobs, albeit criminal experience. I always wanted to have my own shop, so I worked in the public defender's office for about a year. Then I put a shingle out. Do you remember Jerry Kaufman?
Of course.
Jerry kind of mentored me at that time. I put a shingle out. And, you know, as a young lawyer in those days, and we're talking about the 70s, we had, I don't know, maybe 300-400 lawyers here. Now we have 15,000.
Tops.
You could put a shingle up and be open for business, and whatever came in the door, you found a way to represent. Divorces, real estate, gaming, criminal, personal injury. When I started handling personal injury cases, I really loved it, because it was always, you know, David and Goliath. It was always the little guy fighting the big insurance company and the big corporation, and I kind of liked that aspect of it. So it was then that I made a decision to be exclusively, you know, representing people who were, you know, hurt and injured.
How do you personally respond when people say, Ed, you're just one of those ambulance chasers? When in essence, it's a lot more than that. But how do you respond when people say, you're just an ambulance chaser lawyer?
Look, the area of the law that is most dear to my heart, and is, I believe, one of the most important to the public, is having access to the courts, giving people access. I mean, that's what levels the playing field between, when I talked about David and Goliath. David is as formidable as Goliath in a courtroom. They have equal footing. So when you're representing people in that manner, I mean, that's, you know, a great motivation. And when you provide access to the little guy, doesn't matter how much money you have or you don't have, because what lawyers in my line of work do is basically contingency fee arrangements. You don't have to pay a lawyer $500-600 an hour to pursue a case. You make it an arrangement, you know, typically it's a 1/3, 33%, and you take a percentage. It's called the contingency fee. But that gives access to people without money to fight. You mentioned some of the big guys. Mm-hmm. We talked about the $104 million verdict. It was against one of the largest pharmaceutical industries in the world. And any one individual doesn't have the resources to fight a case like that. A case like that in court would cost, just in court costs and expert fees, you know, over $1 million just to get the case to court. So, so this is what we do. And then, look, are there some people who may or may not be ambulance chasers? Yes. I mean, you try to establish yourself for who you are, have your values, your morals, and your reputation is what you make it as an individual.
And you're never afraid to put your face out there. I mean, listen, you're on so many billboards all throughout, not just Las Vegas, but throughout you're not afraid to put your face out there saying, this is who I am and this is what I stand for.
Right. I'm proud of what I have accomplished, and I put my face out there because I don't have any hair. If I had hair like yours, I would never be on the billboard, because my head is my logo. You know, it's like, that's how I'm recognized.
Exactly.
You know, if they came up tomorrow with a cure for baldness, I would pass.
There's another part of what you have done in this community that I think a lot of people do not know. You, if I'm not mistaken, tell me if I'm wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, you are one of the first people who stood up and said, lawyers should be able to advertise. Lawyers should have the right to advertise like anybody else has the right to advertise. There was a lot of people that said, oh, is he wrong? It shouldn't be allowed.
Right.
You stood up for that.
Stood up for that, to the dismay of many people today. There's so many of lawyers that do advertise that, but the television stations are very appreciative. Yes, the Let's go back to 1978, 1979. I was watching television one day, and there was an ad on TV by Sunrise Hospital advertising for patients to come to the hospital. I said, what? And that, no hospital or doctor at that time ever advertised. And the thought, why would a hospital have to advertise? What I learned was that at that time, hospitals at some level are really hotel rooms. I mean, they have to fill up rooms like hotels do. And Sunrise Hospital did a study, and they determined that their vacancy factor over the weekend was down. And it was down because doctors would admit patients on
Mondays.
On Mondays, exactly, on Mondays. Mm-hmm. And you knew if you were a patient, the doctor could get you out on a Friday so he can go play golf over the weekend. He was going to get his patient discharged on Friday. So as a consequence, the weekends were, the vacancy factor was very high. So the hospitals said, let's do a program where if somebody checks in for a voluntary procedure, we're not talking about emergencies here. We're talking about, okay, you got a hernia, you're going to go in and,
get it fixed.
Yep. So they said, okay, they ran commercials that if you checked in on a Friday and spent the weekend in the hospital and got out on a Monday, they had to deal with Hawaiian Air. They would fly you to Hawaii for on a trip. I was dumbfounded by this. I found it so interesting. And I realized that, hey, if doctors can do it, why can't lawyers? And we were the first in Nevada to advertise. Up until a couple years before that, it was not, the bar associations had not allowed lawyers to advertise. The United States Supreme Court made a decision, the Bakke case, that
you had that right.
Yeah, it's a First Amendment right, and it's information to the public.
We're going to take a break for a couple seconds. When we come back, I want to talk about the other side of who you are. I want to talk about the man that I know is so much involved in this community and cares so much in this community. And I think it's a great story for people to understand that you can be successful and you can give back. So we're going to take a break for a couple of seconds. When we come back, more with this amazing man, Ed Bernstein. Stay with us. We'll be right back. What makes a man a man? What makes an individual that very special individual? What does it take for them to become a part, not only taking from a community, but giving to a community? Our very special guest once again, Ed Bernstein. Welcome back. Okay. You, for as long as I have known you, have believed, I wear a pin all the time that says, make a difference. And we all have the opportunity to make a difference in someone's life every single day. You've become very successful as a businessman, very successful as a lawyer. But a part of who you are and what you are is not only being that success, but giving back and making the community better. Where'd that come from? Did it come from your original roots? I mean, you, like myself, were born and raised on the East Coast. We were not a wealthy family. We struggled as kids. Where did that come from?
Yeah, you're correct. I mean, my parents did nothing but work just to be able to provide, a life for my sister and I. I didn't grow up in a wealthy home at all. And there was very little time for anything else. And I think what you're asking me really didn't develop until I moved to Las Vegas. And when I moved here, this is such an unusual town, and I'm sure you can attest to this. It's, on one hand, it's such a small community, and on the other hand, it's such an urban center. But the small part of it that I'm referring to are the people, the accessibility of the people, how people do things for each other. So when I moved here, I was just overwhelmed by all the help that everybody was offering me. Senior attorneys, judges, mayors, governors. Within the first 2 months of moving here, I've met the governor. I mean, where do you move to a state and you're socializing with the governor?
Not in New York or New Jersey.
Yeah, it was Michael Callahan at the time.
Yeah.
And
great governor.
A wonderful guy. And by the way, he's one of the people, when I think about, at that time, people who had an influence on me, it was Mike O'Callahan, it was Hank Greenspun, it was Art Marshall. I mean, people who...
Amazing people.
Who always gave back. And I think a lot of that I learned from them. And when I realized that this is the nature of living in Las Vegas, is that you work with people, you help people. We don't have 100 years of different generations of having to work your way up into the hierarchy. Here, it's in Las Vegas, you're judged for what you do and who you are now.
There is now a lot of things going on in our world that I know upsets you, that I know bothers you. I know the 1 October shooting was something that really struck home with you and it impacted you. Today there's a lot being said about banning assault weapons and doing things. How do you make that balance for yourself of balancing out, this is what I believe personally, this is what I'm going to now fight for my clients?
Yeah. I think I learned that in 1999, 2000, as you know, I have one of my daughters had a chronic illness. And she was born in 1989 and was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when she was 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So,
a wonderful young lady.
Right, so her mom and I would spend a lot of time in hospitals. And we'd go into doctors' offices and hospitals, and we'd be prescribed experimental medicines that were incredibly expensive. Insurance company would deny coverage. I'm an attorney, this is what I do for a living. We would fight with the insurance companies and get coverage for these very expensive medicines. I looked around the room, I saw all these other people who weren't getting the medicines. Couldn't afford to fight, didn't have the right coverage. I decided then that, okay, I'm going to try to make a difference and run for the United States Senate and do something in 2000 mm-hmm. to advocate for a patient bill of rights, to advocate for reducing the cost of prescription medicines. I spent a year and a half, I kind of gave up my law firm for a year and a half, ran for the U.S. Senate basically on those issues. I lost. The issues continued. It hasn't quite worked out yet the way I had hoped, because the Affordable Care Act is just a small piece of not really working the way it should have. But the cost of prescription drugs got a little bit better as the Senate and Congress ultimately did pass some legislation. It wasn't enough. It's still a big problem. But I learned at that time that all you can do is do your best, to try to effectuate a change or make a difference. And if it doesn't work in one direction, you switch gears and you try it a different way. So we got involved, on a personal level, trying to fight this illness and fight the disease. So my target has changed a little bit, but I am still a very big advocate and supporter.
But your fight is still there.
It's still there, and I'm still don't understand why we have insurance companies in the middle of our medical care. If we took the insurance companies out and gave all the money which, by the way, the number one most successful businesses in the world are these insurance companies, and we put that money into the hands of doctors, back into the hands of patients so they can have choice in their care, we'd have an incredible medical system.
There's a lot that I know about you, Ed, and a lot that I'm respected for being the person that you are. One of the things, and we have a lot of people that watch now around the country and throughout the West, the one thing that I've learned about you of late is how strong you are as an individual. You have faced within a very short period of time the death of your daughter, the death of your mom, who meant so much to you. And I see this very strong individual that has emerged from that. There are people that are facing all of that right now. How did you turn the tragedies that you were facing into this strong individual who now I see as standing up and saying, their lives meant something. We now have to fight to do more. How'd you do that? And what's the advice you give to them?
I don't really have an answer to that question other than I have 6 daughters, so I live in a world of women. So if anything, I've learned the strength and the valor from women on how, because quite honestly, they get a bad shake. Mm-hmm. Women are much stronger than men. Than men.
Yep, much
than
stronger.
Men. They're much smarter. I don't get it. You know, my wife has an expression, you know, that the man is the head, but the woman is the neck and controls the head. So, you know, but it's true. So a lot of when you talk about patience, when you talk about perseverance, resilience, I mean, those type of characteristics, values, I mean, women are much better equipped than men. So if anything I've learned from the women in my life.
Las Vegas has come a long way. Where do you see Las Vegas going? Where do you see the next move for Las Vegas? I know you're very much involved in the Vegas Golden Knights, probably, I think, one of the greatest hockey teams that's ever come. Amazing hockey team.
The best sports story in the history of sports.
Ever. And soon we'll have the Las Vegas Raiders. But where do you see the town coming and going?
When people ask, hey, are the good old days better? When you and I got here, I mean, people thought the mob controlled the Strip, and we had these icons like Liberace and Wayne Newton and Mo Dalitz and, you know, characters, right? Characters. And people say, don't you miss the good old days? Well, it's like, you know, when people romanticize the past, there is a lot of good things and there is a lot of bad things too, right? I mean, it was hard to, you know, we had no retail, we had no restaurants, we had no culture. We had no culture, we had no museums, no Smith Center, no anything. Nothing. Right, you wanted to go somewhere, you got in your car and you drove in the heat to LA. Well, so now we have that, but you have more people, and so you have, you know, big city problems that involve more people. And it used to be very easy to make changes in Las Vegas. If you had an idea, in Philadelphia, if somebody has an idea, let's build a monorail or something, and 50 years later, they're still talking. Yeah, exactly. They're still talking about it, right? Here, somebody gets an idea, and bingo, it happens, right? So I think that's the dynamic part of Las Vegas. But we are a large city, and we have, you know, a big homeless situation. As you know, you drive down to Channel 3, you see it all the time. You know, it's not good. Crime maybe, you know, be what it is. We have this October 1 thing that because we're such a target, and we are a target. We are a target. Because we probably epitomize what certain sectors of this world despise most about the West. You know, we have it all right here in Las Vegas.
But as long as we have people like you, Ed, I think the future of this town remains bright, and I'm so very honored that you've joined us on the program today. And I will say this to you, that the door's always open here at the Liberace Mansion. At any time that you want to come in and join us and talk about Las Vegas, we'd love to have you. Thank you, my friend, for being with us.
Thank you, Steve.
You're just an amazing man. It is about the people of Las Vegas, not just the hotels, the people, and iconic people like Ed Bernstein is what it really is all about. We'll have some closing words in a moment.
Hi, I'm Frankie Shinta, downtown's king of entertainment. You're watching Under the Vegas Sun with Steve Schorr.
Like my friend here, being an icon of a community is very, very important. Having somebody like Ed Bernstein, who is indeed an icon of the community, and all the things that he has done for this community, it's amazing to know all the parts and pieces of what made him who he was. We're so honored today to be able to gain that insight from this very, very special man. I'm Steve Schorr. Until the next time, be safe and enjoy life under the Vegas sun.